The Greyjoy flagship Silence made its way through the calm waters of the Sunset Sea. For nearly a fortnight it made its way north, accompanied by dozens of Greyjoy support ships. Captain Valen Greyjoy had nearly lost its cargo of royal flesh and blood. The young naive girl could have escaped his grasp and fled back to the capital. Valen often wondered what had kept her in Old Town. She had scaled the high tower of Old Town to intercept her false intentions he had sent to King's Landing. To risk her own personal well-being was not typical of royalty, Valen thought. Still, she was part Stark, and the wolves of the north would never pass on the opportunity to do what they thought was righteous. Even to their own detriment, Valen laughed. Valen continued to ponder the state of his voyage as the helm reported the passing of the Shield Islands, en route to Pike. The last significant obstacle in their voyage was now the fleet anchored outside of Lannisport. The Lannisters held no love for Greyjoys, 'tis was true. However, the burning of the Lannister fleet and subsequent invasion of the Iron Islands led to the death of both of his father's brothers. Valen clawed at the banisters of the Silence as he remembered the near destruction of his house. If not for the legitimization from the king in the north, House Greyjoy would have already been considered extinct, all due to the ignorance of his father Theon and the ineptitude of his grandsire Balon Greyjoy. No longer, Valen thought to himself. He had made assurances for future security of his house. No opportunity had ever presented himself until the warlock had made his presence and intentions known. The foreigners had rallied the Vale and the Riverlands before he had secured the Iron Islands. Whatever bastard sits the throne makes no matter to Castle Pike. King Gendry had named Valen the Lord of the Tides, but his recognition was too little too late. House Baratheon was the reason why House Greyjoy was nearly wiped from the earth. Valen looked forward to soon returning the favor. The heir to House Baratheon was bound and gagged in his hold below decks. Her murder of one of his crew had all but removed what little protection Valen could offer her. As a captain of a Greyjoy warship, there were traditions more carefully regarded than laws that must be abided by. Failure in this regard could lose Valen his command and even his life. Only their extended porting in Old Town had curbed his crew's desires. Each new day at sea would increase the likelihood of Brianna being taken against her will, and his as well. The sun had recently set over the appropriately named sea. The Shield Islands were now due east. The Silence sailed due north to Pike and was next to pass Lannisport. The Lannisters were the last possible stumbling block before reaching the Iron Islands with their prize. The strife between Lord Tyreek and Lord Tyrion would likely position Casterly Rock against the throne. The Hand's influence over the Lannister navy was seemingly greatly lessened. The days ahead would reveal whether the Ironborn would have to fight their way back to the Iron Islands. Valen himself brought Brianna her daily meal. It was now known to the crew she was a skilled warrior and was no longer to be underestimated. She was granted the privilege of remaining seated at the very least. Her feet were stocked and her arms secured above her head. She remained properly clothed but was immobilized and put into complete and utter submission. Her head was covered by a burlap bag as she had reduced herself to spitting. Valen now brought her meals to prevent another beating. Valen noticed her face severely bruised after she had accosted the steward. He assumed she would either behave or at least he could cover for her resistance if there were no other witnesses. He pulled the bag off her head as she squinted, and her eyes adjusted to the light. He sat cross-legged directly opposite of her as he began to nibble at her meal of salted beef and stale bread. Valen swore he heard her stomach rumble. Still, her stubbornness stood affront. She avoided his eye and refused to show any sort of weakness or acknowledge his presence. He was sure this was the first time in her life she felt completely helpless.
There is no point in denying me, Princess. You're obviously famished. The steward you spat upon received 12 lashes. Striking a bound prisoner is outside our code.
Valen paused, and Brianna still refused him. She provided him with entertainment at the very least. It's likely she still did not realize how far Valen had extended himself to provide her with the slightest amount of safety.
Come now, there is no shame in eating, Princess. We are still a fortnight away from the Iron Islands. We have no interest in carrying you ashore. Now, eat, girl,
Valen ordered more sternly than he had ever spoken to her. Her face was as bruised as her ego, and the whites of one of her eyes was now blood red. Brianna had certainly taken a beating 2 days prior. Still, she never once admitted to being in pain, nor her spirit broken.
I'll be short with you, Princess. Either way, there will be meat in your mouth before this night is out, one way or another. Best you take the easy path.
Valen finished. He felt guilty he had to resort to petty threats, but Brianna left him no alternative. He offered to feed her first. Again she refused, but gently shook her head while finally raising her large brown eyes to meet his. Her raspy voice genuinely countered his offer.
Water, please, my lord.
Valen obliged as he inverted the skin. Brianna drank furiously in her helpless state as she turned her head, choking slightly. She regained her breath and took the spout back into her mouth. Once she was filled. She again turned her head as the spout continued soaking her to the bone.
Meat, please, my lord. I'll behave.
She begged, although attempting to not appear to be begging. The salted beef was more tender than Valen had anticipated. She was able to chew quickly and then quickly beg for more. If Valen was not concerned for his life, if she was able to free herself, it actually would have been quite an intimate moment. She finished her meal for the first time in days. Only then did she feel comfortable speaking.
Is there anything I could do to have my hands lowered, my lord? Even for just a moment. Perhaps I could put other parts of me to good use. They seem to please you, back in Old Town.
We can dispense with manipulation, Princess. You're not likely to have your hands freed no matter what you take in your mouth.
Brianna pouted slightly. Valen assumed she was likely even being sincere, but he had to keep up appearances. He sat opposite of her in silence for a few minutes before suggesting they play a game.
We can ask each other questions, if you like.
We better get a move on then. I have quite the evening planned, my lord.
And if I was to depart, what would the ladies' night entail?
I'd lean to my left and shit on your floor, all the while wishing I could scratch my goddamn face.
Brianna jested and Valen seemed amused. He then cleared his throat before responding.
We ask each other questions and try to get each other to lie. If caught in a lie, there will be a price to be paid.
And how could the captain punish me further?
Brianna asked, and Valen had hoped she would. He claimed a raven's feather from his blouse and held it up for her to see. He smiled widely as he slowly lowered it to her feet. Brianna then panicked when she realized what he was implying.
No, please stop. All right, I'll answer honestly.
Brianna laughed uncontrollably. She recovered quickly once Valen withdrew the feather from her feet.
Gods, you're a bastard. And how am I to return the favor when you lie?
I'll lower your hands, Princess, and allow you to sleep lying down this evening.
Agreed, Captain. Who goes first?
The lady, obviously.
Valen answered quickly, and Brianna thought on her first question for the sea captain.
Did you want to be my escort to the Stormlands? Or were you doing the bidding of some distant sorcerer?
I challenged your father to single combat and nearly lost a few toes for my trouble. I desired the honor, Princess.
I believe you, Captain.
You should, Princess. And speaking of royalty, does Milady enjoy being a princess?
I do not, my lord. I have not. My parents refused to marry, and I remain their bastard.
Surprisingly, Princess, I do believe you.
Good. Why have you defended me from harm? Why have you not taken me for yourself?
That is 2 questions, Princess. But I will continue to indulge you. The Ironborn have a reputation, one I am not proud of. The realm will soon be cast into war with the Silence taking no part to ensure your safety, Princess. Who knows who will rule the realm when it's all said and done? Returning you safe and virtuous should ensure the survival of my house. Do you still think I remain an honest sailor?
Indeed I do, Captain. If the Ironborn's reputation is something that needs to be rectified, I dare say, are you proud of your father?
It was an interesting question. His father, Theon Greyjoy, died a hero but lived his life as a coward, a craven, Valen thought. He died without ever knowing he sired a son, and likely would not have cared. Valen realized too many seconds had passed before his response.
Theon Greyjoy died a hero, recognized by the king himself. My only regret is that I was not named for him.
Valen responded to what he thought was a convincing answer. The judgmental eyes across from him did not seem to be convinced. She was waiting for him to finish. Unlikely his undue delay would find him credible. Still, she refused to call him a liar. Valen's patience ran thin as he held the feather in one hand and his battle axe in the other. Valen sprang to his feet in a rage and grasped the helpless girl's throat, his nose a few inches from hers as her eyes welled during this mild strangulation. Valen spoke softly to her terrified face.
Do it. Call me a liar, you damned bastard.
She tried to turn her head as he loosened his grip. She exposed her bruised cheek to him, and Valen ran the edge of his axe down that same cheek. Not enough to harm, but just to intimidate. Valen now noticed he stood in a shallow puddle, which would just have embarrassed Brianna further.
I don't want to answer, my lord. I don't think you a liar, my lord. Please. I don't want to play anymore. Please, my lord.
Valen knew Brianna could feel his hot breath down her delicate neck. Even when she was an emotional babbling mess, Valen thought her to be beautiful. He carefully chose his final words for her, knowing she desperately desired to expose him.
Now who's the fucking liar?
Valen released her in disgust, more with himself than with the princess. In a rage, he swung his battle axe, severing the rope that held her wrists upright. The weight of her body slumped to the ground with a slight whimper. He admitted his dishonesty to her with a single swing of his axe, and it communicated his most inner thoughts regarding his father. Valen made his way topside, frustrated with himself at how this girl consistently got the better of him. The sea was calm as they now were well past the Shield Islands amidst a rain shower. The watch in the crow's nest had raised the alarm. Valen's eyes rose to see which bearing held the proposed threat. The watch simply reported, "Up." Valen spun around the helm in search of the threat from the sky. Valen ordered the Scorpion manned and armed on the forward end of the Silence. He heard it before he could see it, the great green beast he first saw down in the stepstones. The giant flapping wings created gusts that strained their sails. He expected the fire breather to illuminate the night sky at any moment. Rhaegal flew low over the fleet but took no aggressive actions. He was either curious or simply desired to intimidate them. The exact intentions Valen had just shown to Brianna, he thought. The great green monster then continued flying northeast in obvious search of land.